What if I told you? This has all happened before, not once, not twice. Every single time an empire thought it was untouchable, it collapsed. Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union, different flags, same ending. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. The United States is not special. It's following the exact same 7-stage pattern. And we are already deep into stage 5. This isn't fear. This is pattern recognition. Massive debt, internal division, people distracted while the foundation cracks. Sound familiar? But here's the truth most people miss. Collapse doesn't destroy everyone. It creates opportunity for the few who are paying attention. So the real question isn't, is it happening? The real question is, are you awake enough to see it and smart enough to act before everyone else does? Let me tell you something that most people don't want to hear, because it requires effort. It requires humility. And it forces you to admit that maybe, just maybe, you don't know as much as you think you do. History is not just something you learned in school to pass an exam and forget the next day. History is data, it's patterns, it's signals, and if you're not paying attention to it, you're putting yourself at a massive disadvantage. Because here's the truth. This isn't the first time people have felt like they were living in the most powerful, most advanced, most untouchable society in the world. People in powerful empires always feel that way, right before things start to break. It's human nature. You get used to growth, you get used to dominance, you get used to thinking, we're different, the rules don't apply to us. And that's exactly when people stop looking for the cracks. I'm obsessed with patterns. Not theory, not opinions. Patterns. And when you look back, when you really study what happened to past empires, you start to see something that's honestly a little uncomfortable. The details change, the language changes, the technology changes, but the behavior stays exactly the same. There's always a phase where people ignore the warning signs because life still feels fine. There's always a phase where people argue more with each other than they focus on the bigger picture. And there's always a moment where the majority realizes what's happening. But by then, it's too late to react effectively. And I get it. This is where people push back. They say, yeah, but this time is different. Of course it feels different. It always feels different when you're living inside of it. Nobody ever thinks they're the ones in the pattern. Everyone thinks they're the exception. But patterns don't care about your feelings. Patterns don't care about your pride. Patterns just repeat themselves over and over again for the people who aren't paying attention. And this is where I want you to lean in, because this isn't about being negative. This isn't about fear. This is about awareness. Massive difference. Fear freezes you. Awareness empowers you. When you understand that there are predictable cycles in how societies rise and fall, you stop being reactive and you start being proactive. You start asking better questions. You start positioning yourself differently. Because the truth is, the information is out there. It's not hidden. It's not some secret reserved for a few people. It's just that most people don't care enough to look. They're too busy scrolling, too busy arguing, too busy being entertained. And meanwhile, the signals are right in front of them. The same kinds of signals that showed up before every major shift in history. So when I say history leaves clues, I mean it literally. It's leaving breadcrumbs everywhere. The question is, are you picking them up? Or are you stepping over them like they don't matter? And here's why this matters so much on a personal level. Because you don't need to control an entire country to change your outcome. You don't need to predict everything perfectly. You just need to be more aware than the average person. Just a little bit ahead. Just a little bit more prepared. That's where the advantage is built. The people who win, the people who come out stronger on the other side of big shifts. They're not magicians. They're not geniuses. They're just paying attention earlier than everyone else. They respect the patterns. They learn from what already happened instead of pretending it can't happen again. So don't romanticize history. Don't treat it like some distant story that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with you. Because the moment you start recognizing patterns is the moment you stop being blindsided by them. And if you're not learning from what already happened, you're volunteering to learn the hard way. And this is where it gets really uncomfortable, because nobody wants to admit this part. It's easy to talk about external factors. It's easy to point fingers at systems, governments, institutions. But the real danger, the one that quietly builds under the surface, is comfort. Not struggle, not chaos. Comfort, because when things are hard, people wake up. When things are uncertain, people pay attention. When survival is on the line, humans get sharp, they get resourceful, they get focused. But when things feel easy, when life feels predictable, when the system seems stable, that's when people start to coast. That's when awareness drops. That's when discipline fades. Comfort is seductive. It convinces you that what you have right now is guaranteed. It tells you that tomorrow will look just like today. And slowly, without even realizing it, you stop questioning things. You stop preparing. You stop pushing yourself to grow. And that's exactly how vulnerability is created. Think about it. No empire collapses at its weakest point. It collapses at its most comfortable point. When people believe deep down that nothing can really go wrong, that's when the cracks start forming. Because nobody is paying attention to maintaining the foundation anymore. Everybody is just enjoying the surface. And I see this everywhere, not just at a macro level, but in individuals too. People get a little bit of success, a little bit of stability, and they ease off the gas. They stop learning. They stop adapting. They start assuming they've made it. And that mindset, that's dangerous, because the world doesn't care about your comfort. Markets don't care. Technology doesn't care. Change doesn't care. Everything is always moving, always evolving, always shifting. And the second you stop evolving with it, you start falling behind, whether you feel it immediately or not. This is why complacency is so scary. It doesn't hit you all at once. It creeps in. It's subtle. It feels like you're safe, like you've earned the right to relax. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you shouldn't enjoy your life. I'm not saying you should live in constant stress. What I'm saying is, you can't confuse comfort with security, because they're not the same thing. Comfort is a feeling. Security is a strategy. And too many people are living based on feelings instead of strategy. They feel good, so they assume everything is good. They feel stable, so they assume everything is stable. Meanwhile, underneath that feeling, things can be shifting in ways they're completely unaware of. And this is exactly how big problems blindside people. Not because the signs weren't there, but because they weren't looking. They were too comfortable to look. So what do you do with that? Do you panic? Do you live in fear? No, that's not the move. The move is awareness with intention. It's choosing to stay sharp even when things feel easy. It's choosing to stay curious when everyone else is coasting. It's choosing to keep building when you technically don't have to. Because the people who maintain their edge during comfortable times, they're the ones who are ready when things shift. They don't need to scramble. They don't need to panic. They've already been putting in the work quietly while everyone else was distracted by comfort. And let me be very real with you. Discipline is a lot harder when you don't feel pressure. When your back is against the wall, action is forced. But when everything feels fine, discipline becomes a choice. And that's where most people lose. They wait for urgency instead of creating it internally. The winners? They don't wait. They manufacture urgency. They act like things could change at any moment, not out of fear, but out of respect for reality. They understand that nothing stays the same forever, and they position themselves accordingly. So if you're sitting in a place right now where things feel okay, where life feels manageable, where nothing seems urgent, that's the exact moment you need to check yourself. That's the moment to ask, am I growing or am I coasting? Because coasting feels good until it doesn't. And by the time most people realize they've been coasting, they're already behind. Comfort isn't the reward. Comfort is the test. And then we get to the part that's hiding in plain sight, the part that most people feel but don't fully connect, the combination that shows up over and over again right before things start to unravel. Debt, division, and distraction. Not one of them alone, not two of them. All three at the same time. That's when things get real. Let's start with debt, because people love to downplay it. They hear big numbers and it becomes abstract. It doesn't feel personal, it doesn't feel urgent. But here's the reality. When debt grows faster than the system's ability to sustain it, you're not building strength, you're building pressure. And pressure doesn't just disappear. It builds quietly until something gives. It's like stretching a rubber band further and further, telling yourself it's fine because it hasn't snapped yet. But the snap is not random. It's inevitable if the behavior doesn't change. And the tricky part? Most people don't feel it immediately. Life still goes on, things still function, so they assume everything is under control. But underneath that surface, the weight is growing. And at some point, that weight starts influencing everything: decisions, priorities, stability. It limits flexibility, it reduces options. And when a system loses flexibility, it becomes fragile. Now layer on division. This one is even more dangerous because it hits at the human level. When people stop seeing each other as teammates and start seeing each other as enemies, you lose cohesion. You lose the ability to solve problems together. And instead of focusing on building, everyone starts focusing on blaming. Division is loud, it's emotional, it's addictive. People get pulled into it because it gives them something to fight for, something to react to. But while everyone is busy arguing, the bigger issues don't get addressed. They just sit there, growing, getting more complex, harder to fix. And here's what most people miss. Division doesn't just happen by accident. It gets amplified, it gets fed. Because a divided group is easier to control, easier to distract, easier to manage. If people are fighting each other, they're not questioning the bigger picture. They're not stepping back and asking, what's actually going on here? Which brings us to distraction. And this one might be the most powerful of all, because you don't need to force people to ignore reality if you can entertain them enough to do it willingly. Distraction today is everywhere. It's constant. It's engineered to keep your attention locked in, scrolling, reacting, consuming. And again, I'm not here to demonize entertainment. I love it. It's part of life. But when it becomes the default state, when it replaces awareness, that's when it becomes a problem. Because attention is your most valuable asset. Where you put it determines what you see, what you understand, and ultimately how you act. So when you combine these three, rising debt, increasing division, and nonstop distraction, you create an environment where problems grow quietly while people are either too divided or too distracted to deal with them effectively. That's the pattern. That's the setup. And this is where I want you to really lean in, because this isn't about pointing fingers. This is about recognizing the environment you're operating in. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how easy it is to get pulled into arguments that don't actually move your life forward. You start noticing how easy it is to spend hours consuming content without gaining anything meaningful. You start noticing how little attention is being paid to the fundamentals. And awareness here is everything, because if you're not careful, you get swept into the same cycle. You become part of the noise instead of stepping back and seeing the signal. So what's the move? It's not to disconnect completely. It's not to ignore reality. It's to be intentional. It's to protect your attention like it actually matters. Because it does. It's to step back from unnecessary conflict and focus on what you can control. It's to understand the bigger picture without getting lost in the chaos of it. Because while most people are caught up in debt they don't understand, arguments that don't serve them, and distractions that drain them, there's a small group of people doing the opposite. They're simplifying, they're focusing, they're staying clear-headed. And those are the people who are ready when things shift, because they didn't let the noise blind them. They paid attention when it mattered. And this is where I need you to really lock in, because this is the part that actually gives you power. Up until now, we've been talking about patterns, systems, behaviors at scale, but none of that matters if you walk away feeling like you're stuck, like you're just a passenger watching everything unfold. That's not the point. The point is understanding one simple truth. You might not control the system, but you absolutely control how you respond to it. And I see too many people give up that control way too easily. They spend all their energy complaining, arguing, blaming external forces for why they're stuck. And look, I get it. There are things happening that are bigger than any one individual. That's real. But sitting there focusing on what you can't control, that's a losing game every single time. Because while you're focused on that, you're ignoring the things you can control. Your skills, your mindset, your work ethic. Your ability to adapt, your ability to learn, your ability to create opportunities instead of waiting for them. That's where your leverage is. And the people who understand this, they move differently. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They don't expect stability. They build themselves in a way where they can operate in instability. That's the shift. It's not about hoping the world gets easier. It's about becoming someone who can handle it when it doesn't. You've got to start thinking like that. You've got to start asking yourself, if things change tomorrow, am I ready? Not in a fear-based way, but in a preparation-based way, because readiness isn't built overnight. It's built in the quiet moments, the daily decisions, the things nobody claps for. It's learning skills that actually have value, not just things that look good on paper, but things that solve real problems. Communication, adaptability, digital awareness, understanding how to create, how to sell, how to connect. These are the kinds of skills that travel with you no matter what's happening around you. And let's talk about income for a second, because this is where a lot of people get uncomfortable. Relying on one single source of income in a world that's constantly shifting, that's risky. I'm not saying you need to quit your job tomorrow. I'm saying you need to start building options, even small ones, even slow ones, because options give you flexibility and flexibility gives you power. And here's the part people don't like. It takes work, it takes time, it takes consistency. There's no shortcut here. But the alternative? The alternative is being completely dependent on systems you don't control. And that's a much bigger risk. You've got to reframe how you see effort. Effort isn't punishment. Effort is insurance. Every hour you spend learning something new, building something small, improving yourself, that's you investing in your own stability. That's you reducing your dependence on things outside your control. And mindset plays a huge role here too, because if you're constantly negative, constantly overwhelmed, constantly focused on worst-case scenarios, you're not going to take action. You're going to freeze. And freezing is the worst possible move in a changing environment. You need a mindset that's grounded, not delusional, realistic but optimistic. A mindset that says, yeah, things might get tough, but I'm going to figure it out. That belief is everything, because it drives action, and action creates results. And I want to be very clear, this isn't about becoming some perfect, unstoppable version of yourself overnight. That's not real. This is about progress, small steps, daily improvements, stacking wins over time. Because when you focus on yourself like this, something interesting happens. You stop feeling helpless. You stop feeling like everything is happening to you. You start feeling like you have a say in your own direction. And that's the goal. Because no matter what happens at a macro level, there will always be people who figure it out. Always. In every shift, in every downturn, in every moment of uncertainty, there are individuals who adapt, who build, who find a way forward. The difference is they didn't wait. They didn't sit around hoping things would stay the same. They prepared for the possibility that they wouldn't. And that preparation, that's what separates people who panic from people who pivot. So stop waiting for control over the system and start taking full control of yourself. And this is where everything comes together. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about understanding patterns or avoiding mistakes. It's about positioning. It's about whether you're reacting late like everyone else, or whether you're seeing things early enough to actually do something about it. The people who win in moments like these, they're not guessing. They're not lucky. They're paying attention at a different level. They're reading the same signals everyone else has access to, but they're interpreting them differently. They're not waiting for confirmation from the crowd. They're not waiting for headlines to tell them what's already obvious. And let's be honest, most people wait. They wait until it's undeniable. They wait until it's trending. They wait until everyone around them is talking about it. And by the time that happens, the opportunity to move early, it's gone. Now you're just reacting. Now you're playing catch up. That's the gap. That's where the separation happens. Because seeing something early feels uncomfortable. It feels uncertain. It feels like you might be wrong. And most people would rather be comfortable and late than uncomfortable and early. That's just the truth. They want validation. They want agreement. They want to feel safe in numbers. But the people who actually get ahead, they're okay with that discomfort. They're okay making moves before it's obvious. They trust their awareness. They trust the patterns they've studied. They trust their ability to adjust if they need to. And that last part is important. They're not locked into being right. They're flexible. They're paying attention in real time. They're willing to pivot if new information shows up. That's what keeps them ahead. It's not perfection. It's responsiveness. And I want you to really think about this in your own life. Where are you waiting for permission? Where are you waiting for things to be 100% clear before you take action? Because clarity is expensive. By the time everything is clear, the upside is usually already gone. Speed matters, awareness matters, execution matters. And here's the thing. Being early doesn't mean making reckless decisions. It means making informed decisions with incomplete information. That's the game. That's how it's always been. The people who understand that, they don't freeze when things are uncertain. They lean in. They gather more context. They test. They move. While everyone else is debating, they're doing. And over time, that compounds. Small early moves turn into big advantages. Small awareness gaps turn into massive differences in outcome. And it doesn't happen overnight. That's why people underestimate it. They don't see the immediate impact, so they assume it doesn't matter. But it does. Because when things finally shift, and they always do, the people who were early aren't scrambling. They're already positioned. They've already made adjustments. They've already built momentum. And while everyone else is trying to figure out what's happening, they're already moving forward. That's what you're playing for. Not perfection, not certainty. Positioning. And the beautiful part is, this is available to anyone willing to pay attention. You don't need insider information. You don't need to be connected. You just need to be more aware than average and more willing to act than average. That's it. But most people won't do it. Not because they can't, but because it's uncomfortable. It requires effort. It requires thinking differently. It requires stepping outside of the crowd. And that's why the opportunity exists in the first place. So if you're sitting here right now, hearing all of this, understanding the patterns, seeing the signals, recognizing the shifts, you're already ahead. The only question left is what you do with that awareness. Do you sit on it like everyone else, or do you use it? Because the difference between those two decisions, that's everything. The winners don't wait for the world to change. They move before it does.